Ambassador Zixathala had never felt fear like this before. Her blue skin flickered with bright lights of panic as she stood in the great council chambers. Around her, representatives from 17 different alien species whispered in scared voices. Some had tentacles that shook. Others had feathers that stood up in alarm. All of them were afraid. The holographic display in the center of the room showed the terrible truth. Red dots marked dead worlds. Each dot had been a living planet just days ago. Now they were empty rocks floating in space. The Krillian swarm has returned, Zixathala announced to the council. Her voice trembled despite her efforts to stay calm. They came from the edge of the galaxy. Our scouts barely escaped to tell us what happened. She pressed a button and the display changed. It showed massive organic ships that looked like living creatures. They were bigger than cities. Smaller creatures swarmed around them like angry insects. These were the bioships of the swarm, and they had only one purpose: to eat everything alive. The colony on Rexus 7 had 40 million people, continued the ambassador. The swarm consumed them all in 6 hours. They left nothing but bare rock. An old Centauri delegate raised his forearms in distress. How many ships do they have? Our, long-range sensors detected over 10,000 bioships, Zixathala replied. But there could be many more. The swarm reproduces quickly. Every world they consume makes them stronger. The council chamber fell silent. Everyone knew the stories about the Krillian swarm. 300 years ago, they had appeared from deep space and eaten entire star systems. Back then, the galaxy had barely managed to drive them away. Many brave species had died fighting them. The survivors thought the swarm was gone forever. They were wrong. What about our combined fleets? Asked a representative from the aquatic worlds. Her gills fluttered with worry. We sent everything we had, Zixathala said sadly. The Fourth Fleet engaged them near the Spiral Nebula. The bioships tore our vessels apart. Admiral Kethron managed to escape with only 12 ships out of 300. More frightened whispers filled the chamber. The galactic fleets were made for exploration and peaceful trade. Their weapons were designed to disable, not destroy. Their shields were meant to protect against space debris, not living creatures that could heal from any wound. The swarm ships heal themselves, explained Zixathala. Our energy weapons barely slow them down. When we damage them, they grow back stronger. It's like fighting our own nightmares. A tall, thin delegate from the crystal world stood up. His body made musical sounds as he moved. Perhaps we could negotiate with them? They don't communicate, Zixathala said firmly. The swarm only knows hunger. They see all organic life as food. They will not stop until every living world is consumed. The council members looked at each other with growing despair. Their beautiful, peaceful civilization was about to end. Their elegant ships and advanced technology meant nothing against an enemy that turned their own biology against them. There might be one option, said a small voice from the back of the chamber. Everyone turned to look. It was Scholar Mirth, from the archives. She was very old and very wise. She had access to information that most people had forgotten. Speak, commanded the council leader. Scholar Mirth stepped forward slowly. There are records of a species on the outer rim. They come from a world called Earth. Their star designation is Sol 3. Most civilized species avoid them. Why? Asked several delegates at once. Because they are dangerous, Mirth replied. Their world tried to kill them for millions of years. It made them into something we have never seen before. They call themselves humans, but the rest of the galaxy knows them by another name. She paused, letting the tension build. Deathworlders. The chamber erupted in shocked gasps and frightened chatter. Everyone had heard whispers about the humans. They came from a planet so hostile that it created warriors instead of peaceful beings. Stories said they fought wars against their own species. They had weapons that could destroy entire planets. They were everything that civilized society was not. You cannot be serious, said the Centauri delegate. They are barbarians. Yes, agreed Scholar Mirth, but they are barbarians who know how to kill things that seem impossible to kill. Their entire evolution was one long war against death itself. If anyone can fight the swarm, it would be them. Zixathala felt a chill run through her body. Asking the humans for help would be admitting that civilization had failed, but watching worlds die was worse than swallowing their pride. What do we know about their military capabilities? She asked. Scholar Mirth activated her personal datapad. They have been building warships for the past 50 years. Their vessels are designed for combat, not exploration. They carry weapons that are banned by 17 different treaties. They test their soldiers in conditions that would kill most of us. The debate continued for hours. Some delegates refused to consider contacting such dangerous beings. Others pointed out that they would all be dead soon if they did nothing. The red dots on the display kept growing as more worlds fell to the swarm. Finally, Zixthala called for a vote. All in favor of sending a distress signal to the humans? Slowly, reluctantly, most of the delegates raised their hands, tentacles, or appendages. It was not a confident vote. It was the choice of people who had run out of options. The signal will go out immediately, announced Zixthala. She walked to the communication console and began typing the message. How do you ask monsters to save you from other monsters? How do you beg for help from beings you have always avoided? She kept the message simple. Please. We are dying. We'll pay any price. Then she attached all their tactical data about the swarm. Battle recordings, sensor readings, analysis of the bioships. Everything they knew about their enemy went into the transmission. The signal burst out from the council chambers at faster-than-light speed. It raced across the galaxy toward a small blue world that most civilized beings considered too dangerous to visit. Zixthala stood at the great windows of the council chambers, looking out at the stars. Somewhere among those lights, worlds were dying. Somewhere else, her message was reaching beings who might be their only hope. She touched her communication device and opened a channel to her home world. My dear family, she said softly, I have done something that may save us all. Or, it may damn us to a fate worse than the swarm. But we had no choice. The reply came back quickly. What did you do, Mother? Zixthala closed her eyes. I asked the devils for help against the demons. Far across the galaxy, the signal reached Earth's orbital command. Admiral Sarah Chen was reviewing routine colony reports when the priority alert flashed on her screen. She opened the transmission and watched the attached data files. Her face grew very serious as she saw the recordings of the swarm attacks. Then she smiled, and it was not a kind smile. Alert all commands, she told her staff. Code red mobilization. We have work to do. The message from the Galactic Council had been received. The Deathworlders were about to answer. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center of Luna Base, studying the holographic display that showed the alien distress signal. Around her, the best military minds of humanity gathered to see what their species had been called to do. The we display showed red dots spreading across a star map like drops of blood. Each dot represented a dead world. The recordings from the Alien Council played on repeat, showing massive organic ships that looked like living nightmares. They consumed entire planets and left nothing behind. How many confirmed kills? Asked General Marcus Torres. His scarred face showed no emotion as he watched the destruction. 17 worlds in the past week, replied Colonel Martinez, the intelligence officer. Population estimates suggest over 2 billion sentient beings have been consumed. The room fell quiet. Humanity had fought many wars, but they had never seen wholesale slaughter on this scale. The alien recordings showed creatures that ate civilizations like humans ate breakfast. What do we know about these Krillian things? Torres continued. Dr. Elizabeth Kane, the chief xenobiologist, stepped forward. She had been studying the alien data since it arrived 6 hours ago. They appear to be a hive-minded species that treats all organic life as fuel. Their ships are living organisms that can heal damage quickly. Traditional energy weapons are almost useless against them. Almost useless is not completely useless, said Admiral Chen. She zoomed in on one of the battle recordings. Look at this section. When the alien ship concentrated fire on a single point, they managed to cause real damage before the creature healed. General Torres nodded slowly. So they can be hurt. They just heal too fast for normal weapons to be effective. That's not our biggest problem, continued Dr. Kane. These creatures reproduce by consuming organic matter. Every world they destroy makes them stronger and more numerous. If we don't stop them soon, they'll become impossible to defeat. Admiral Chen turned to face the assembled officers. These were people who had fought in the asteroid belt wars, survived the rebellion on Mars, and explored the deadly outer planets. They were hard people from a hard world. The aliens are asking for our help, she said simply. They're dying, and they think we might be able to save them. Why us? Asked Captain Rodriguez from the Special Forces. These aliens have technology we don't. Their ships are faster than ours. Their science is more advanced, Dr. Kane answered before the Admiral could speak. Because their technology is designed for peaceful purposes. They build ships for exploration, not war. They developed science to understand the universe, not to kill efficiently. They've had peace for so long that they forgot how to fight. And we never forgot, said Torres grimly. We never had the chance to forget, corrected Admiral Chen. Earth tried to kill us every day for millions of years. We learned to be predators because everything else on our world was trying to eat us. We developed weapons because we had to fight for survival. She pressed a button, and the display changed to show Earth's military production facilities. Massive shipyards orbited Jupiter, building vessels that looked nothing like the elegant alien craft they had seen. Human ships were angular and brutal, covered in armor and bristling with weapons. While they were exploring the galaxy and making friends, we were preparing for war, continued the Admiral. Every human settlement has military defenses. Every colonist is trained to fight. We built our civilization assuming that something would eventually try to destroy it. The officers looked at the production numbers with satisfaction. Humanity had been busy during their first 50 years in space. 3,000 warships of various sizes floated in orbital facilities around the solar system. Millions of soldiers trained on the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. Weapon systems that had been banned by every civilized treaty sat in storage, waiting for a war that required them. So we're actually going to do this? Asked Captain Elena Vasquez, commander of the dreadnought Terran Fury. We're going to save aliens we've never met from monsters we've never seen? Yes, said Admiral Chen without hesitation. It's the right thing to do. It's also the smart thing to do, added General Torres. If these swarm creatures finish eating the galaxy, they'll come for Earth eventually. Better to fight them out, there than in our own solar system. The planning began immediately. Human military doctrine was based on overwhelming force and acceptable losses. They would not try to dance around the enemy like the aliens had done. They would hit the swarm, with everything they had, and keep hitting until nothing was left. We'll need to modify our weapons, said Dr. Kane. Energy weapons might not be enough. We should load chemical weapons designed to disrupt organic processes. Several officers looked uncomfortable. Chemical weapons had been banned on Earth for over a century. Using them felt like going backward to a darker time. This isn't a war between humans, Admiral Chen reminded them. This is survival against monsters that eat entire species. We use whatever works. The mobilization order went out across the solar system. Shipyards that had been building slowly began operating at maximum capacity. Soldiers who had been training in simulations prepared for real combat. Scientists who had been studying theoretical problems suddenly had practical applications for their deadliest ideas. Captain Vasquez received her orders at the Jupiter shipyards. The Terran Fury was one of humanity's largest warships, designed to fight multiple enemies at once. Her crew of 800 included Marines trained to fight in hostile environments, and engineers who could keep the ship running even when half the systems were destroyed. How long until we're ready to deploy? She asked her first officer. 72 hours, Captain. We're loading the new chemical warheads and installing additional armor plating. Vasquez nodded. She had read the alien reports about ships that healed themselves. Human vessels would need to survive long enough to deliver killing blows. Admiral Chen stood on the observation deck of Luna Base, looking out at the fleet that was assembling. 3,000 ships of various sizes hung in space like metal sharks, waiting to hunt. Each one was crewed by humans who had trained their entire lives for a war like this. Her communication officer approached with a message from the Galactic Council. It was another desperate plea for help, along with updated information about the swarm's advance. Send a reply, Chen ordered. Tell them help is coming. Tell them to try to stay alive until we get there. The officer hesitated. Should we tell them how many ships we're sending? Chen thought about it. The aliens might panic if they knew that humanity was committing almost their entire military force to this mission. They might also panic if they thought the humans weren't taking the threat seriously enough. Tell them we're sending everything we have, she decided. They deserve to know that we're not holding anything back. As the message was transmitted, Admiral Chen looked out at her fleet one more time. These ships represented 50 years of human preparation for a war they hoped would never come. Now it had arrived, but not in the way anyone expected. They weren't going to fight for conquest or resources or territory. They were going to fight because someone had asked them for help, and humans had never been able to ignore a cry for help. All ships, she announced over the fleet communication channel, prepare for hyperspace jump. We have promises to keep. The response came back from 3,000 ships at once. Ready to jump, Admiral? Admiral Chen smiled grimly. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you awakened the Deathworlders. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Villani space and immediately saw hell itself spreading across the stars. 3 massive bioships hung in space near the garden world of Threvis Prime. Each creature was the size of a small moon, its surface covered in pulsing organic matter that looked like diseased skin. Smaller organisms swarmed around them like insects, millions of them darkening the space between planets. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the horror unfold on the main screen. The planet below had been beautiful once. The alien data files showed crystal cities and vast gardens. Now dark tendrils from the bioships were reaching down to the surface, draining the life from everything they touched. "Sensor report," she ordered calmly. "3 primary targets designated Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie," replied the tactical officer. "Each bioship is approximately 40 kilometers long. We're detecting millions of smaller craft ranging from fighter size to cruiser class." "Life signs on the planet?" "Dropping rapidly, Admiral. Whatever they're doing down there, it's killing. Everything fast." Behind the human fleet, a small group of alien vessels watched from a safe distance. These were the survivors from the Galactic Council, refugees who had escaped the destruction of their homeworlds. They had come to watch the humans attempt the impossible. Ambassador Zix Thala stood on the bridge of the Council ship Hope's End, studying the human formation through her ship's sensors. The alien vessels looked brutal and dangerous. Nothing like the elegant craft her people built. They were covered in armor plating and weapon systems that seemed designed for one purpose only. "What are they waiting for?" asked the ship's captain. "Why don't they study the enemy first? Why don't they request additional intelligence?" Zixathala was wondering the same thing. Any civilized species would spend days analyzing the swarms, behavior patterns, and defensive capabilities. They would develop careful strategies and plan multiple escape routes. The humans did none of these things. Instead, Admiral Chen opened a fleet-wide communication channel. "All ships, this is command. We have visual confirmation of the enemy. Rules of engagement are now in effect. Show them what humans do to things that eat our friends." The response from 3,000 ships was immediate and enthusiastic. "Understood. Admiral, engaging enemy forces now." The human fleet scattered into attack formations and accelerated directly toward the bioships. No hesitation, no fear, no careful planning. They simply charged into battle like ancient warriors riding into combat. The aliens watching from their refuge ship were horrified and amazed at the same time. "They're insane," whispered the captain. "They're flying straight into the swarm." But Zixathala was beginning to understand something about these strange beings from the deadly world called Earth. "No," she said quietly. "They're not insane. They're predators. And they just found something that needs killing." The first contact between human weapons and swarm bioships changed everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare. "Captain," Vasquez led the first attack wave in the dreadnought Terran Fury. She had studied the alien battle recordings and noticed something the Council forces had missed. The bioships healed quickly, but they healed randomly. They didn't necessarily repair the most critical damage first. "Target the connection points between the main body and the feeding tentacles," she ordered her weapons officer. "Full bombardment. All batteries." The Terran Fury opened fire with every weapon system at once. Plasma cannons, railguns, missile batteries, and experimental particle beams all focused on a single point on the nearest bioship's surface. The creature's hide began to burn and tear, but immediately started healing. "It's not working, Captain," reported the weapons officer. "The damaged areas are regenerating too fast." "Switch to chemical warheads," Vasquez ordered without hesitation. "Full spread, maximum concentration." The second volley was different. Instead of trying to burn through the creature's hide, the chemical weapons attacked its cellular structure directly. The bioship's healing process suddenly became its weakness. As it tried to regenerate damaged tissue, the chemicals spread through its system like poison. For the first time in recorded galactic history, a section of Krillian bioships stopped healing and began to die. The creature screamed. The sound came through space itself, a psychic shriek of pain and surprise that was felt by every living being in the system. The swarm had never experienced permanent damage before. "That got their attention," muttered Captain Vasquez as millions of smaller organisms began swarming toward her ship. "All ships, this is Terran Fury. Chemical weapons are effective. Repeat, chemical weapons are working." The battle became a nightmare of violence that the civilized galaxy had never imagined. Human ships didn't retreat when they took damage. Instead, they accelerated toward enemy vessels and rammed them at full speed, detonating their fusion cores inside the creatures' bodies. The destroyer Lightning Strike lost its engines to a swarm of organic fighters. Instead of calling for rescue, the captain ordered all power to the forward weapons and drove his ship directly into the mouth of a bioship. The explosion tore a hole clean through the creature's core. Admiral Chen watched the battle from her command ship, coordinating attacks and sending fresh vessels to replace those that had been destroyed. The human losses were terrible, but they were achieving something that had seemed impossible just hours before. They were winning. "Admiral," called her communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the alien refugee ships. Put it through." Ambassador Zixthala's voice came over the channel, filled with amazement and horror. "Human Admiral, what you are doing is incredible, but the cost is too high. You're losing hundreds of ships." Chen's reply was calm and steady. "Ambassador, on our world we have a saying. Freedom isn't free. Neither is saving people's lives. We knew the cost when we came here. But your people are dying." "Yes," agreed the Admiral. "And because they're dying, millions of your people will live. That's a trade we're willing to make." "Captain." Vasquez found herself in the fight of her life as organic fighters swarmed around the Terran Fury. Her ship's armor was being eaten away by acidic secretions from the creatures. Hull breaches appeared faster than the damage control teams could seal them. "Captain, we've lost main power," reported her chief engineer. "We're running on backup systems only." "How long until core breach?" she asked. 20 minutes, maybe less." Vasquez looked at the tactical display. The largest bioship was still alive, still feeding on the planet below. Millions of people were dying while she fought for her ship's survival. She made a decision that would have horrified any civilized commander, but seemed perfectly natural to a human raised on stories of heroes who sacrificed everything to save others. "All hands, this is the captain," she announced over the ship's communication system. "We're going to take the big one down from the inside. Abandon ship or stay for the ride, but we're flying directly into that thing's mouth." Not a single crew member left their post. The Terran Fury broke from the swarm of fighters and accelerated toward the massive bioship. Its hull was burning from acid damage, its weapons were failing one by one, but its engines still worked, and its crew still fought. As they approached the creature's feeding tentacles, Captain Vasquez opened a channel to Admiral Chen. "Admiral, this is Terran Fury. We're going in. Tell the alien survivors that humans keep their promises." "Understood, Captain. It's been an honor." The Terran Fury disappeared into the bioship's feeding apparatus and detonated its antimatter core deep inside the creature's vital organs. The explosion tore through the bioship's internal structure, destroying organs that had never been damaged before. The creature died completely. For the first time in 3 centuries, a Krillian bioship had been killed so thoroughly that it couldn't regenerate. The psychic scream of death echoed across the system. The remaining bioships and their swarms suddenly seemed uncertain, confused. By the loss of one of their major nodes, Admiral Chen seized the advantage immediately. "All ships concentrate fire on the remaining targets. They're hurt and confused. Hit them now while they can't coordinate properly." The battle continued for 18 hours. When it finally ended, all 3 bioships were dead. The swarm of smaller creatures had been scattered or destroyed. The planet below was badly damaged but still alive. In the aftermath, as rescue ships pulled survivors from damaged vessels, Ambassador Zixthala stood on her bridge, looking at the debris field that had once been an unstoppable enemy force. "Captain," she said to her ship's commander, "send a message to the Galactic Council. Tell them we have found our salvation." "What should the message say?" Zixthala watched a human rescue ship pulling survivors from a destroyed bioship, treating wounded enemies with the same care they gave to their own people. "Tell them that the Deathworlders answered our call for help," she said quietly. "And tell them that the galaxy will never be the same." News of the human victory spread across the galaxy faster than the speed of light itself. Species that had been preparing to die suddenly found themselves talking about hope instead of extinction. Ambassador Zixthala had sent the battle recordings to every surviving civilization. The footage showed human ships doing the impossible, killing creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. But more than that, it showed humans dying willingly to protect people they had never met. On the crystal world of Seftar, the population watched the recordings in stunned silence. Their graceful 6-armed bodies trembled as they saw crude human vessels ramming bioships without hesitation. Their musical language had no words for such selfless violence. "They sacrificed themselves for strangers," sang the Seftar High Council, in harmonious amazement. "What manner of beings does such a thing?" Similar reactions echoed across dozens of worlds. The peaceful species of the galaxy had always assumed that advanced civilization meant the end of warfare. Violence was something primitive beings did before they learned better ways to solve problems. The humans had shown them something different. Sometimes violence was the only solution. Sometimes civilization needed warriors to protect it from things that wanted to destroy it. Admiral Chen established her command headquarters on the liberated world of Threvis Prime. The planet had been badly damaged by the swarm's feeding process, but it was recovering. Human medical teams worked alongside alien doctors to treat the survivors. The temporary command center was built in what had once been a beautiful park. Now it was just bare dirt and dead trees, but human engineers were already planning how to restore it. Earth's harsh environment had taught them how to bring life back to damaged places. Status report, Chen requested as her senior staff gathered around the holographic display. The immediate area is secure, reported General Torres. We've established patrol routes around the major trade lanes. So far, no sign of additional swarm activity. Dr. Kane stepped forward with her xenobiology team's findings. We've been studying the dead bioships. The news is both good and bad. Give me the bad news first, Chen said grimly. The creatures we fought here were just scouts. Based on their size and development, I estimate they were juveniles. The real swarm is still out there, probably much larger and more dangerous than what we've seen. The silence in the command center was heavy. If those massive, terrifying creatures had been children, what would the adults look like? And the good news? Asked Torres. We know how to kill them now, Dr. Kane said with satisfaction. The chemical weapons work because they disrupt the creature's regenerative process. We can mass-produce these compounds using standard industrial equipment. Admiral Chen nodded slowly. What about their home base? Have we learned anything about where they're coming from? That's where it gets interesting, continued Dr. Kane. We captured several smaller organisms alive. Under interrogation, she paused. Well, they don't really communicate like we do, but we managed to extract some memories from their neural tissue. She activated a new display showing a star chart of the galaxy's outer rim. Several areas were marked in red. They come from dark space, beyond the edge of known systems. There are worlds out there that existed before most current galactic civilizations. The swarm has been using them as breeding grounds for thousands of years. How many breeding worlds? Asked Chen. At least 7. Possibly more. The implications hit everyone at once. If there were 7 worlds full of creatures like the ones they had just fought, the galaxy was still in terrible danger. We need more ships, said Torres bluntly. A lot more ships. But Admiral Chen was already thinking ahead. She turned to her communications officer. Open a channel to Earth Command. Priority Alpha transmission. While they waited for the connection, she studied the faces of her staff. These were good people who had come across the galaxy to fight monsters. They deserved to know what she was thinking. We're not just going to defend against these things, she announced. We're going to hunt them down and destroy every last one of them. The communication link activated, showing the face of Admiral Morrison back on Earth. He looked tired but determined. Sarah, we've been following your progress. Congratulations on the victory. Thank you, sir, but we have a bigger problem. This was just the beginning. We need to mobilize everything we have. She transmitted Dr. Kane's findings about the breeding worlds. Admiral Morrison's expression grew darker as he studied the data. How long do we have? He asked. Unknown, replied Chen, but I recommend we assume not very long. These creatures reproduce quickly. Every day we delay gives them more time to build their forces. Understood. Full mobilization is already underway. We're pulling ships from every command, including the Home Defense Fleet. That surprised Chen. Earth's Home Defense Fleet never left the solar system. It was humanity's last line of protection against invasion. Sir, is that wise? Sarah, if we lose this fight, there won't be a home to defend. We're betting everything on stopping them before they reach Earth. The transmission ended, leaving Chen alone with her staff and the weight of responsibility that came with their mission. Over the following weeks, human forces spread out across the galaxy like antibodies fighting an infection. They established bases on strategic worlds and began patrolling the major hyperspace routes. More importantly, they started hunting. Human doctrine had always been based on taking the fight to the enemy. While the galactic civilization had tried to defend their worlds and hope for the best, humans went looking for trouble. Captain Rodriguez led a squadron of fast attack ships into the Outer Rim territories, following the trail of dead systems that marked the swarm's passage. Her orders were simple: find the enemy and report back. But when she found a swarm feeding operation on the mining world of Kethmoran, she didn't just report. She attacked. All ships, this is Rodriguez. We have visual on enemy forces. 2 medium bioships and approximately 50 smaller craft. They're in the middle of feeding operations. Her squadron consisted of only 12 ships against overwhelming odds. Any sane commander would have retreated and called for reinforcements. Rodriguez was not interested in being sane. Attack pattern Delta, she ordered. Full chemical loadout, maximum spread. We're going to hurt these things and then run before they can respond properly. The attack was quick and brutal. Human ships swept in at high speed, launched their chemical weapons, and accelerated away before the swarm could organize a proper response. When the battle was over, both bioships were dead, and the smaller creatures were fleeing back toward deep space. Similar attacks occurred throughout the outer rim. Human strike forces appeared without warning, killed everything they found, and disappeared back into hyperspace before reinforcements could arrive. The swarm began to change its behavior. Instead of spreading out to consume as many worlds as possible, the creatures started gathering into larger groups for protection. They posted guards around their feeding operations and sent scout ships ahead to watch for human ambushes. For the first time in their species' history, the Krillian swarm was being careful. They had learned fear. Ambassador Zixthala received regular reports about human activities from her position at the Council Emergency Headquarters. Each report showed the same pattern. Humans appearing where they were least expected, fighting with desperate courage, and winning battles that should have been impossible. But the reports also showed the cost. Human casualties were enormous. They lost ships and crews at a rate that would have crippled any other military force, yet somehow they kept fighting. How do they do it? She asked Dr. Vorth, the Council's chief strategist. How do they continue fighting after losing so many people? I have been studying their psychology, replied the elderly scholar. Their species evolved on a world that killed most of them before they could reproduce. They learned to accept death as the price of survival. They don't fight to avoid dying. They fight to make their deaths meaningful. Zixthala found that concept both horrible and inspiring. Her people had always viewed death as the ultimate failure. Humans seemed to view it as just another tool for protecting the things they cared about. A new transmission arrived from Admiral Chen's headquarters. The human commander appeared on the screen, looking tired, but determined. Ambassador, I wanted to update you on our progress. We've located the swarm's primary breeding worlds. We're preparing for a final assault. How can we help? Asked Zixthala immediately. Chen smiled, and for a moment she looked almost kind instead of terrifying. Keep your people safe, Ambassador. We'll handle the monsters. After the transmission ended, Zixthala stood looking out at the stars. Somewhere, among those lights, human beings were preparing to fly into the heart of darkness itself. They were getting ready to fight creatures that had existed since before her civilization was born, and somehow, she believed they would win. Because humans had answered when the galaxy called for help, and they had never learned how to give up. The final battle would take place in a region of space that had no name on any galactic chart. It was dark space, beyond the edge of known systems, where stars were old and dying. Here, in the shadow of worlds that predated most galactic civilizations, the Krillian swarm had built their greatest stronghold. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, looking at the sensor readings that showed what they were facing. 7 worlds orbited ancient red dwarf stars. Each planet pulsed with organic activity that could be detected from light years away. These were the breeding worlds, where the swarm had grown and multiplied for thousands of years. Final count on enemy forces? She asked her tactical officer. Conservative. Estimate is 50,000 bioships of various sizes, came the reply. That's just what we can detect from long-range sensors. There are probably more. The human fleet had grown during their campaign across the galaxy. Ships from every human colony had joined the fight. Volunteers from other species brought their vessels, though they were equipped with human weapons and crewed by human tactical officers. The final count was 8,000 ships. They were outnumbered 6-1. Any word from the diplomatic front? Chen asked. The Galactic Council is still debating whether to send support ships, replied her communications officer. They're concerned about the casualty projections. Chen almost smiled. The aliens were still thinking like politicians while humanity prepared for a war that would determine the fate of every living world in the galaxy. Tell the Council they can send flowers to our funerals if this goes badly, she said calmly. But we're going in with or without them. General Torres approached with the final battle plan. It was simple in the way that human strategies always were: hit the enemy as hard as possible and keep hitting until nothing was left alive. We've identified the largest planet as the primary breeding world, he reported. Sensor data suggests it's covered in structures that are probably brood queens, massive organisms that coordinate the swarm's activities. How massive? Asked Chen. Planet-sized, Admiral. Some of the queens appear to be larger than our capital. Ships. The bridge fell silent. Fighting creatures the size of cities was one thing. Fighting creatures the size of continents was something else entirely. Recommendations? Chen asked. We go in fast and hard, Torres replied without hesitation. All ships, all weapons, everything we have. We don't give them time to coordinate a proper defense. Admiral Chen nodded. It was what she had expected. It was what humans always did when faced with impossible odds. She opened a fleet-wide communication channel. Every ship in the human fleet would hear her words along with the alien vessels that had chosen to stand with them. All ships, all crews, this is Admiral Chen. In 1 hour we will jump into the heart of enemy territory to face odds that any reasonable person would call suicide. We're going to attack creatures that have terrorized the galaxy for centuries. We're going to fight in conditions that will kill most of us. She paused, looking at the determined faces around her bridge. But we're not going for reasonable odds. We're not going because we expect to survive. We're going because someone called for help, and humans answer when people need saving. We're going because there are innocent beings in this galaxy who deserve to live in peace. The response from 8,000 ships came back as one voice. Understood, Admiral. Ready for jump. Then let's go remind the universe what happens when you threaten our friends. The human fleet jumped into hyperspace and emerged in hell itself. The breeding worlds hung in space like infected organs, dark, twisted planets covered in structures that pulsed with malevolent life. Bioships swarmed around them in numbers that blocked out the stars. The psychic screaming of millions of creatures filled space itself with rage and hunger. The largest planet was a nightmare beyond imagination. Continental-sized brood queens covered its surface, their bodies extending across thousands of kilometers. They were the heart of the swarm, the ancient intelligence that had been planning galactic conquest for millennia. Sweet Mother of God, whispered someone on the bridge. Admiral Chen looked at the horror spread before them and felt something she had never expected to feel. Pity. These creatures had been alone in the dark for so long that they had forgotten how to be anything except hungry. They were like children who had grown into monsters because no one had ever taught them any other way to live. But pity didn't stop her from giving the order that would destroy them all. All ships, engage enemy forces. Show them what Earth's children learned from their mother. The battle that followed was beyond anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Human ships dove into swarms of bioships like ancient warriors charging into combat. They fired chemical weapons that turned the swarm's healing abilities against them. They rammed enemy vessels when their guns ran out of ammunition. Captain Martinez, commanding the cruiser New Harmony, found his ship surrounded by organic fighters that were eating through his hull plating with acidic secretions. His weapons were offline and his engines were failing. Captain, we're losing structural integrity, reported his chief engineer. Hull breach in sections 4 through 7. How long until we lose life support? 10 minutes, maybe less. Martinez looked at his tactical display. His ship was dying, but there was one of the smaller brood queens within ramming distance. He could see its massive form pulsing with the effort of spawning new creatures to join the battle. All hands, this is the captain, he announced over the ship's intercom. We're going to take one of the big ones with us. Anyone who wants to abandon ship has 30 seconds. Not a single crew member left their post. The New Harmony accelerated toward the brood queen, her hull plates falling away as the organic fighters continued their attack. She struck the massive creature at full speed and detonated her fusion core deep inside its body. The explosion tore through organs that had been growing for thousands of years. For the first time in its ancient existence, the brood queen experienced death. Similar sacrifices occurred throughout the battle. Human crews flew their damaged ships into enemy strongholds, trading their lives for strategic targets. They fought with the desperate courage of beings who knew they were probably going to die but were determined to make it count. Admiral Chen coordinated the battle from her flagship, watching her fleet die ship by ship while they slowly carved through the enemy forces. The casualties were terrible, but they were achieving their goal. The swarm's coordination was breaking down as more brood queens died. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from one of the brood queens, reported her communications officer. Put it through. The voice that came over the channel was ancient and alien, filled with an intelligence that was older than most galactic civilizations. It spoke in perfect galactic standard, proving that the swarm had been listening to their victims for centuries. "Human Admiral," the voice said, "why do you fight so hard for beings you have never met? Why do you die for those who are not your own species?" Admiral Chen looked at the tactical display showing the carnage around them, then activated the reply. "Channel, because someone asked us for help," she said simply. "And because it's the right thing to do." "We do not understand this concept of right," the alien voice replied. "We only understand hunger and growth and survival." "I know," said Chen sadly. "That's why you have to die." The final assault on the primary breeding world began as the human fleet, reduced to fewer than 3,000 ships, descended through the planet's toxic atmosphere. The surface was covered with brood queens that stretched across continents, their massive bodies spawning creatures faster than the humans could destroy them. Admiral Chen led the final attack personally, diving her flagship toward the largest, Queen. Her ship was already dying from acid damage and psychic attacks, but her weapons still functioned. "This is Admiral Chen to all surviving ships," she transmitted, as her vessel broke apart around her. "It's been an honor serving with you. Tell the galaxy that we kept our promise." The flagship's antimatter core detonated inside the primary brood queen, triggering a chain reaction that spread through the creature's neural network. The psychic scream that followed reached across the entire system and beyond, carrying the death cry of a species that had existed since before recorded history. One by one, the remaining brood queens died as human ships crashed into their vital organs. The bioships in orbit began to drift aimlessly as their coordination network collapsed. For the first time in millions of years, the Krillian swarm fell silent. The few hundred human ships that survived the battle limped away from the dead worlds, carrying the news of victory back to the galaxy. Ambassador Zixathala received the final transmission from the human fleet while she stood in the council chambers on New Centauri. The message was brief, and delivered by a young human captain whose ship had barely survived the journey home. "The swarm is dead," the captain reported. "All breeding worlds destroyed. Admiral Chen and most of the fleet died completing the mission." The council chamber fell silent. Representatives from dozens of species looked at each other with expressions of amazement and grief. "How many ships returned?" asked Zixathala quietly. 437, ma'am, out of 8,000. The numbers hit the chamber like a physical blow. An entire fleet had died to save the galaxy.